keeps going, and we keep, notice all of these accidentals, we keep straying farther and farther away from E flat major, right? And then we get into entry 3. So the subject comes back, we hear it in its entirety, we get the counter subject, we get counter subject B, all in its entirety. And then finally, episode 4, we get another section, right? And notice as we go, these keep getting longer, these sequences. So here's material from the subject, here's our counter subject material, here's more material from the original subject, and it's just passing it back and forth between the two voices, and we have our counter subject material going on underneath it. And then here we get some free material, all right? And it's going to be imitated, so you're going to hear it in all 3 voices at one point. This is more counter subject material down here. All right, more chopped up. So it gets crazier and crazier as you go. All right. And then we get episode 5. So notice there isn't an entry 4, right? We get episode 4, and then we go right to episode 5. It's not a requirement that you have the entire, that you go to, that you have an entry 4. Although this one is pretty near complete. But there is, yeah, and it's transferring voices here, if you notice. All right. So here's our subject, counter subject, moves to the upper voice, bum, 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 bum. Right? Starts here, ba-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee. So it's all sort of off kilter. We get episode 5. Then we have free material. Here's our entry 5. Actually, I think they screwed up. I think this is entry 4. Okay? We're going to call that entry 4 because it's pretty close. You do get the full theme. All right? We get entry 5 here. So it's all episode 5, free material, broken up. And then finally, entry 5. Bum, ba-da-da, bum, bum, ba-da-da, bum, bum. And this is the ending, all right? So we call this the coda. This is what we call the ending. It's a drive back to E flat major, okay? And yeah, that's basically it. So it's little pieces. You get pieces of the subject. It's not in its entirety, all right? Or actually, no, it is. Yeah. So you get the entire subject. This isn't always the way it is. You get some free material to make it feel like an ending. And yeah. And this is actually more subject material right here. It's not the counter subject. So just drives home the subject. And that's really it. So it's kind of a free analysis. If you look here, they actually wrote it out for you, so you can look at it sort of against, right? Against the piece, and you'll see it's in C minor. And then we move, actually it's in C minor, then we answer in G minor, right? We get the subject back in C minor. And then here we've sequenced it, counter subject, sequence, answer. So yeah. So it's just sort of a map of what this piece looks like, okay? And what each voice is doing, so the upper, middle, and lower voice. Which can be very helpful if you're confused about a section that doesn't seem too clear. And then when we get to the end, lots of free material, chordal expansion is what they're calling it. The tonic pedal point, that's a G at the end, it's just going and then one more entry of the subject, just plain with nothing else going on except some chords and the tonic pedal point to drive home our key signature. And yeah, so that's really it. So you can see, here's the subject. We already went over most of this. We talked about how the change was made. from a real to tonal answer. So we have a tonal answer, not a real answer. And then if we look at our counter subject, we have this material, this 16th note material that runs down. Sometimes we'll reverse it and we'll go the opposite, right? Yeah. Counter subject B, very similar material to counter subject A, with very, just this is different, right? So ba ba da ba bum bum, as opposed to bum 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 bum. So you look for that extra 16th note, right? So it takes a lot of analysis. And if we look at the end, so the fugue includes 5 episodes. The episodes contain no complete subjects or answers. So when you're identifying episodes, you've got to look for no complete subjects or answers, all right? It's all fragments. So we see 9 to 11, and it modulates. And this is really the whole point of these episodes, are to modulate to a new key, right? So 13 and 14, E flat goes to C minor, so it goes back. And then 17 to 20, G minor to C minor. And then it's absolutely not necessary. You don't have to modulate, especially when you get towards the end, because you're driving home back to G minor, right? So if you're already there, you don't want to stray too far if you're coming to the end. So we see the melody in the lowest voice appears again in the upper voice. So that's what we call, remember, melodic inversion, where you can switch the melodies in each voice. And then, yeah, so this is, right? So you see this in the bass voice, and then you'll see the soprano voice take it over. Let's see, which is not to be confused with, if you remember, so melodic inversion, right, is reversing it, whereas, if you remember from earlier, in the previous lecture, invertible counterpoint is when you can switch the voices, okay? So it can either appear as the subject or the counter subject, and both of those things can appear in the bass or the soprano or, you know, the alto, and it doesn't clash, right? So you don't get any dissonant notes that can't be accounted for, whereas melodic inversion is reversing the actual melody. So it's doing a mirror image. Instead of going down, it's going up, or instead of going up, it's going down, okay? So that is melodic inversion. We do get melodic inversion, and you can see this one's going up, takes a leap up, goes down, back up, down, leap up, down, back up, down, right? Whereas this one is going to go down, so it's just going the opposite direction, okay? So down, up, get to the peak, leap down, up, and then up, right? So it's just doing the exact opposite of this guy, okay? In addition to the imitation that's part of the formal design of the fugue, there are a number of imitations in the episodes. One example is measure 9 and 10, where the imitation is in sequences. So again, we see our little sequence, bum, ba-da-da, bum, bum, and then, in what could be called stretto, the soprano figure is imitated by the alto figure, right? So right afterwards, bum, bum, ba-da-dum, bum, bum, ba-da-dum, bum, bum, ba-da-dum, bum, bum. All right, so they come right after one another. So that's another thing to look at for, okay? So your assignment this week is to go to, 3.2 and start analyzing this further, all right? So look for stretto, look for fragments, all right? Look for a complete. So here we could call this probably a fragment. This is our fugue subject, right? And then our counter subject comes in here, or our answer comes in here. The counter subject comes in down here, right? And then this is material that's new, correct? So this could be you call this a fragment of the answer. Bum ba ba bum ba bum. Ba da dee da da. Right? You're just picking up pieces of it. Da da dee da da. Da da dee da da. So you could call this a sequence. Ba dum dum da da dum dum dum. Da da dum dum da da dum dum dum. Anyway, so start looking for those. Start labeling them. So I want you to add these. Look for retrograde if you can find it. That might be a difficult one to find. Look for expansion. Okay? Or diminution. Or inversion. So these four were stretto. I also want you to name the major sections and the episodes and entries. So in addition to that, you're also going to find the exposition. The second section, episodes and entries. Eps and ets. And then label the coda. All right? You don't have to do hardcore harmonic analysis of this. I just want you labeling parts. Okay? So yeah, that should give you plenty to do next week. We will go over it. Please ask me if you have any questions at all, and I will see you guys next week. All right. Have a good weekend, everybody.